Landman here. I study how people build financial ground and how it washes away when they're not looking. There is a word that most people believe they understand, and almost nobody can define precisely when asked to apply it to their own life. The word is enough. Ask someone what enough looks like, not philosophically, not abstractly, but specifically, and the answer almost always drifts. It moves. It expands. It references a number that is always slightly ahead of wherever they currently stand. Enough is the horizon line of personal finance. You can see it clearly from a distance. You walk toward it, and it moves. You earn more, and it moves. You reach a milestone, and it moves again. Not because you are greedy. Not because you lack gratitude. But because the brain is running a program that was never designed to recognize arrival. This is one of the most consequential and least discussed dynamics in all of personal finance. The moving property line. The boundary of enough that never holds its position. And understanding why it moves at a psychological and neurological level is the difference between building financial ground and spending a career walking toward a horizon that was never going to stay still. Let's start with the neuroscience because the mechanism here is specific and important. The brain's reward system is not designed to register satisfaction with what you have. It is designed to anticipate what comes next. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter most associated with motivation and reward, does not spike when you receive an expected reward. It spikes in anticipation of a reward and in response to unexpected rewards. The moment a reward becomes expected, normalized, baseline, the dopamine response flattens. This means that the financial milestone you worked 3 years to reach, the salary you dreamed about, the account balance that felt like it would finally feel like enough, all of these, once reached, produce a dopamine response that is either flat or, in some documented cases, actually negative relative to the anticipation that preceded them. The brain doesn't celebrate arrival. It immediately recalibrates to look for the next threshold. And because the financial environment is saturated with visible markers of the next threshold, the colleague with the bigger title, the neighborhood with the larger lots, the car that signals the next tier, the recalibration happens almost instantly. The property line of enough moves before the ink dries on the milestone you just reached. This dynamic has a name in behavioral economics. It is called the Aspiration Treadmill, and it operates alongside the hedonic treadmill in a way that compounds their individual effects. The hedonic treadmill normalizes what you have. The aspiration treadmill elevates what you want. Together, they ensure that the gap between your current position and your sense of enough never closes, regardless of how much ground you actually accumulate. Now, here is the controversial observation, and I want to sit with it carefully. Most of the infrastructure of modern financial motivation, the goal-setting frameworks, the vision boards, the financial independence calculators, the retirement projections, all of them are built on the assumption that defining a target number will create a stable destination. That if you just know your number, you can plan toward it and eventually arrive. But the research on aspiration dynamics suggests that for most people, the number moves before they reach it. Not because they changed their mind deliberately. Because the brain updated the target automatically in response to environmental cues, income growth, peer comparison, and the hedonic flattening of whatever milestone they last crossed. You don't decide to move the property line. It moves while you're looking somewhere else. The math of this is more damaging than it first appears. If your sense of enough moves upward by even 5% per year, roughly tracking income growth and lifestyle inflation, then the gap between your current position and your enough threshold stays constant in absolute terms while growing in real difficulty. You are running toward a finish line that is moving at exactly your speed. You will be running for a very long time. Landman's approach to this problem begins not with a number, but with a definition. Specifically, a written, concrete, revisited definition of what enough actually contains. Not a net worth target. Not a retirement age. A description. What does the day look like? What does the week contain? What obligations are present? What freedoms are present? What does the house actually need to be, not in square footage aspirations, but in functional terms? What does transportation need to accomplish? What does food need to provide? Written out, specific, grounded in function rather than aspiration. This exercise is harder than it sounds. Because the first draft of enough almost always contains elements that are aspirational rather than functional. The first draft usually has a car that is nicer than necessary, a neighborhood that is slightly more prestigious than required, a vacation frequency that is slightly higher than the rest of the budget can support without crowding the investment rate. Landman calls these aspiration contaminants the invisible upgrades that sneak into your definition of enough because your brain has been calibrating to your peer environment, your income trajectory, and your exposure to visible wealth. The definition of enough needs to be purged of aspiration contaminants before it becomes a stable property line. And that purge requires asking for every element. Is this here because it produces something real in my life? Or is it here because it feels like it should be at my income level? The property line, once defined functionally and defended deliberately, does something that most people in their 30s and 40s have never experienced financially. It holds. The ground stops moving beneath your feet. And when ground holds, when the definition of enough stays stable, every dollar of income growth above that line becomes genuine surplus. Plantable soil. Not absorbed by a lifestyle that grew to match the income. Not consumed by aspiration contaminants. Actually available for the compounding that builds permanent financial ground. Here is what that looks like in real numbers. If your household income is $120,000 and your defined enough requires $80,000 to sustain fully, not austerely, functionally and comfortably, then $40,000 per year is available as surplus. After taxes on that increment, roughly $24,000 per year. Invested consistently at 7% over 15 years, that surplus compounds to approximately $600,000. Not from sacrifice, from clarity, from a property line that held its position while income grew above it. Most people at $120,000 in household income are not accumulating anywhere close to that surplus. They are accumulating between $5,000 and $15,000 annually in investable assets. The difference is not income. It is the stability of the enough line. The land beneath you is only buildable when you know where the property line is. You cannot build on ground whose edges keep moving. The first task of wealth psychology is not to earn more. It is to define enough precisely enough that it stops moving. To hold the line with the same deliberateness that a surveyor holds a boundary, not because the line is sacred, but because without it, nothing permanent can be built. If this made you reconsider where your own property line sits, subscribe. That's all. Just subscribe. New ground here every week.